biographies that have been written on them. And these are more or less accessible at a library. But each city has its own unique history and unique constellation of forces that have shaped it and molded it and kept it in order. And so I would look for biographies that have been written on particular cities, and if not, I would start doing research so as I could create one myself. And the best place to start is the public library and or city hall, and start looking up the names of the folks who you see. And if you see somebody who has, had a certain amount of intergenerational wealth, question where that money came from. Can't none of us choose our parents. Can't none of us choose, where our money come from, but we can definitely choose how it's applied. And so, like I said, so many times, I have friends who were Duke students who never knew that, Robert E. Lee's statue was right there, who never knew that Charles Aycock was a supremacist who co-signed the coup in Wilmington, which came off much like the Tulsa riot, and that, David Duke from Metairie, Louisiana, was once the Grand Wizard of the KKK. Right. And so, so many times we live in the shadows of these histories, but the light isn't shined on them in such a way as people feel aware. And if they do feel aware, they don't feel disempowered, and in a way that gives them actionable intelligence so as to feel comfortable in taking proaction.
Yeah. What was one of the most interesting pieces of history that in your research and in your life of activism that you have found out about Durham that shocked you when you first found out about it?
Yeah, I'm going to get personal.
Okay.
I was talking to my ma yesterday about her time on city council, and she was telling me that when she was on council, and this was back when there was I want to say, what was it, a 12-ward council with the mayor? It was a 12-member council with the mayor as opposed to the current 7-member council.
Right.
And she was saying that when she was on council, so many times there was a vote on things that were going on in the city, going on in Durham, politics as they affected the African-American community. And she would be the one person out of a 12-person council the way that she voted. The one person who was really, really down for us, to the point that, it wasn't about necessarily showing political savvy by doing your House of Cards alignment and winning the Game of Thrones. It was actually about ensuring that we understood that we had a voice and that our interests were represented at all costs. And I didn't know my mom was up there, the only person in the face of 12 folks voting for us, voting for affordable housing, voting for end police brutality and violence, voting for livable wage, voting for less expansion of former Confederate institutions into African-American communities. I didn't know she was the only one. I thought, she's up there. She obviously has allies, but within allies is all lies.
Wow.
And so, the most amazing thing I heard about my city is, number one, that someone like my mother was electable. And number two, that she held it down so well that as soon as they got a chance, they cut the council from 12 to 7 just so somebody like her wouldn't be electable again.
Wow.
And so, I'm in awe at the impact that a single black woman with 6 kids living in affordable housing had on the shape of our city and its politics, present and past, present, and future.
Right. Yes. Those are issues that we're still dealing with now. Now, what do you think about not just here in Durham, but just in general, the whole concept of the PAC system and these?
My mother's name is Brenda My mother's name is Brenda Jean Bowie Burnett. I've been, talking about her in the abstract. Brenda Jean Bowie Burnett's impact on the politics of Durham is the most amazing thing I've seen. Most amazing thing I've learned. All right, I'm sorry, brother. Would you mind repeating your question? Sorry.
Yes. What do you think about the impact of PACs, be that the PACs here in Durham or PACs in other cities that might be listening? I'm thinking about things like the People's Alliance, things like the Durham Affairs, but what kind of impact that they either have or don't have in the election process?
Well, I feel like everybody wants, even if we can't agree on whether we like each other, I think everyone can agree that they want the best for their kids.
Right.
And nobody really wants, somebody else's kid to get hurt or anything. And so I feel like Durham, as a city based around educational institutions, really, really comes together around trying to create the safest space for as many young people as possible. That being said, I ran for office in 2011, and I was stunned when I went to my interview at the People's Alliance, and the interview that I had was right next door to the former Asian and African languages and literature offices on Duke campus, in the middle of Duke campus. And so in my opinion, the PA, People's Alliance, which is one of the major PACs in Durham, is the political arm of Duke University in the city.
Right.
And I see that as being evidenced not necessarily by the rhetorics, but by the proxemics of my experience with them. And so, they're going to have a certain amount of funding, intelligence, followers, and actionable research at play in their execution of their political designs. It's just what it is, because it is what it is.
Right.
I feel like the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People, and that's not to say that any of the folks in the PA have malfeasant intent.
Right.
That's just the conversation on organizational and institutional relationships. Looking at the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People, which is the PAC, which typically, seemingly, possibly, always, whatever descriptor you want to put there, represents minority interest in the city. I feel like their power, our power, I'm a member of the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People. I'm a loyal soldier. I feel like our power has been waning as a result of a certain lack of planning, foresight, and think tanking. I'm a graduate of NCIOPL, North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership, and it's basically a leadership development program and candidate cultivation project that teaches people how to really, do an analysis on the politics of a moment and run an election in such a way as it's winnable. And the skill set I learned from that institution allowed me to critique the practices of the different PACs in Durham. And the People's Alliance runs its runs its program like a leadership development candidate cultivation project, or at least it does now. I feel like there are linkages possible. The Friends of Durham also is a political action committee in Durham, which is basically the conservatives, if not Republican, folks who are not necessarily the typical liberal mindset that we have in Durham. And then also there's the newest one, I'm not sure, but a former council colleague of my mother, Ms. Jackie Wagstaff, has one I think it's called Mothers of Durham, which focuses on women's interests in galvanizing mothers as a political force. And I'm interested to see what they do in the future, because we know that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. That being said, I feel like there are possibilities of linkages across the whole swath of political movements in Durham, but these possibilities are often lost in rhetorics and simplistic planning, if not motivations. And so, I feel like the PAC situation in Durham is actually ripe for a particular type of organizing. I think that, the weaker PACs need to create think tanks that allow them that have people who think like they're not us. It takes a lot to step outside of yourself and think like somebody who doesn't have your interest at heart, or somebody who, would push you off a cliff if they could. But this is what you need to be doing if you're operating politically.
Right.
Because you need to not only think about yourself and your interests, you need to think about the interests of other people, if only for building community, but also so that other people's interests can't be realized over yours in such a way that snuffs out your possibilities and your needs. And so I feel like Durham is ripe for that, but I feel like the cultivation of the intelligence that can see the linkages between all of our interests and bring them together in a proactive fashion is, I feel like that's limited, and we need to find that, cultivate that, enshrine that.
Now, one of the other things that we've talked about on this show in the past is, because we've talked about just in passing the mayoral candidates and here in Durham, as well as a little bit of the other candidates. And we talked about the fact that there seems to be, because of one candidate's running, but there seems to be a push for a youth movement in terms of voting and trying to mobilize the vote. Do you think that is the case, and do you think that is being done in a feasible manner? Because one of our candidates, the one that's most connected to the hip-hop world, definitely has a base that is definitely strong in terms of its youth component.
Yeah, I think that's great. Durham has a critical mass of millennial voters. A lot of them are, the folks who were at the rally, who I mentioned, might be short-term residents, might be migrant by virtue of the university. And I feel like youth voice is, so given our population and the fact that we're a college town and an educational town, a youth voice definitely need be showcased and highlighted in no uncertain terms. I feel like there is a possibility of activating, a critical mass of millennial voters. Whether these millennial voters will be the people who are historically disenfranchised is another thing. I won't say, I'm not even going to give an anecdote. But what I'll say is if someone was really interested in organizing PLC youth, they really just go to the OGs of the informal community organizations and be like, we'll make sure the street sweepers come through your neighborhood every week, and also that, police won't have a carte blanche to bust your heads. and